Welcome back to 20 Side Adventures and my deep dive into Howl of the Wild. So originally I was planning to put this all in one video. Frankly, there's just too much, so I'm splitting it up into a variety of them. On this one, we are going to be getting into the additions to existing classes. So we have Bard, Barbarian, Ranger, and Witch that all have some new features and some new tweaks in this book. So let's go check those out. If you guys like these deep dive contents, please give us a like and subscribe down below, and let's get into it. All right, here we are back with Howl of the Wild. We're going to get into starting with the changes to Barbarian and Druid. So basically, if you are an Animal Instinct Barbarian or an Untamed Order Druid, here's some new options for you. So first of all, we have some feats. We have Brutal Crush. This is available to the Barbarian or the Druid. Single action. You must have already hit them with a bludgeoning weapon, so this will be your second attack. And you make an unarmed strike, and if you hit and deal damage, it has to be bludgeoning, the target becomes stupefied 2 for 1 round. 3 if you critically hit, so that could be pretty robust. Creature comforts, this is again for either. You have become frightened. You found the comfort in the forms of other creatures, insulating yourself from feelings of fear. Reduce your frightened condition value by 1. So you have to be in your morphed or polymorphed effect. You use this reaction, and you're like, oh, I'm a warm, cuddly teddy bear. I'm not afraid, and you get to reduce your fear by 1 step. Rip and Tear, this is like Brutal Crush, but it is for your piercing and slashing. This will let you stack on some persistent bleed damage with your second attack instead of the stupefied condition. Misty Transformation, so when you are a druid and you make that transformation, you can puff into a cloud of mist, creating concealment for you and anyone around you in a 5-foot radius. Toppling Transformation, same basic idea, but this time as you expand into your new form, you can shove or trip an adjacent creature. Defensive Dismissal, let's see, someone critically succeeds a strike against you. You can dismiss your polymorph effect and reduce the strike to a success instead of a critical success. So you will lose your current transformed state, but removing that crit could be pretty valuable. Explosive Metamorphosis. So this one, when you burst with elemental energy, when you change your shape, your transformation now creates a 5-foot emanation. Everyone has to make a reflex save, or they take some damage. 1d6 of that energy rank. It doesn't say... Oh, per rank of spell. So it does level up with you. So 1d6 per spell rank that you have. So that's good that it scales. So it gives you just a little AoE burst when you make that transformation. Cleansing Transformation, you have to have Healing Transformation. And when you use Healing Transformation, your polymorph spell can also attempt to counteract 1 disease or poison afflicting the target. So lets you get rid of maybe some debuffs as well as healing with that. Towering Transformation, this one goes back to the Barbarian. When you grow into your new transformation, each enemy that's smaller than your new size within 30 feet must attempt a will save or become frightened 1 or frightened 2 on a critical. You can also push them if they critically fail. Too much to swallow. While you might be small enough to grab normally, you can change that at a moment's notice. You cast Untamed Form. If you took on a new form that's too large for the effect, you automatically escape. Otherwise, you attempt to escape. If this ends an effect where you enter the creature's space, such as Swallow Whole, exit the creature to an adjacent area where your new form could fit. So basically, when you transform and you get bigger, reaction, break away from some grabs. Let's see, some new animal instincts. Ankylosaurus, so if you want to have that dinosaur heritage, ant, bat, bird, brontosaurus, crab, crocodile, orca, scorpion, seal, spider, tyrannosaurus, wasp. So just a lot of new choices for a barbarian there. Animal form has expanded, so this is for anyone that happens to have the spell, but you can turn into a crab, a crocodile, an orca, or a seal. And if Druid and Barbarian are either of your styles, check out from Beard Sorcery Druid's Mist or Berserker's Rage for some fabulous Beard Sorcery oil scents for your magnificent beard. All right, on to the next one. We have Warden spells and ranger options. So this is going to give you some more spells for your ranger repertoire and a few new feats. Natural conduit, you can use an animal as a conduit for your magic. If your next action you use is cast a spell that has a range, the spell uses the animal as its origin point. So your animal companion or a friendly animal can be the point of your casting. It does take your action, so it might be a whole 3 action to do that, but that extra range boost could be pretty useful. Animal strength, you tap into the primal strength of your animal feature. When you gain a claw or jaw attack from an animal feature, you can choose a weapon you're carrying and apply all the runes from that weapon to that unarmed attack. That's pretty cool. So this helps if you do this fairly often. You don't have to worry about getting hand wraps and things like that. You can just keep your primary weapon and then augment with these natural attacks you get. Nature Prowler, when you begin your turn hidden or unnoticed by your hunted prey, that creature is off guard until the end of your next turn. Seems kind of normal, and if you're in a natural surrounding, you can avoid notice and sneak at full speed. So I think that's really where the benefit is. Yeah, because I think for the most part, well, you get it for 2 rounds. So, okay, that's what it's doing different. Because generally sneaking, they're going to be off guard to that first attack, but they'll be off guard until the end of your next turn also. So it does give you some benefits there. Not a lot of feats, but right into their spells. Distracting Decoy, you conjure a colorful, fast-moving shape, such as a bird. They must make a will save. On a failure, they become off guard until the start of your next turn. On a failure, they're off guard, and they take a -2 to their attacks. So double dipping on penalties there. That's pretty good. Not a bad use of a single action. Keen Smell. Your nose becomes more sensitive to the sense of the wild, the better for you to track your quarry. For the spell's duration, you gain the scent as an improvised sense with a range of 30 feet. Your hunted prey can't be undetected by you as long as it is within scent range. So that's pretty cool. If you can smell your hunted prey, they are always detected. Heightened increases the range to 60 feet, so that can be really powerful if you're dealing with creatures that disappear, invisibility, things like that. Slime Spit, you can spit some toxic goo, super gross, 2d6 poison damage with a reflex save, and it's right in their face, so they're getting dazzled on a success or a failure, and then blinded on a critical failure. So that can be pretty rough. Does scale for damage. Canopy Crawler, you give your animal companion or yourself a climb speed. Imitate Fauna, so this one's kind of interesting. You disguise an animal as another animal. Could have some uses in a couple different situations. At 5th level, it can be to 6 different animals. Threatening Mimicry, you appear larger and stronger to nearby creatures, appearing to possess threatening features like antlers, claws, and poison to their senses. 10-foot Emanation, will save on a success, they're frightened 1, and it doesn't decrease if it damaged you during that turn. So that's kind of interesting. So if they hit you, they're still going to be afraid. Failure, they're frightened 2. Critical failure, frightened 3. Which if they're attacking you on a critical failure, that frightened 3 sticks around. Could be pretty strong, but I suspect with that 3 debuff, they'll be missing you more times than not, so it might be ticking down, but still a good way to let that linger. Warning Stripes, basically you or your animal companion get poison if someone attacks you with an unarmed attack. Because you know you're now a poisonous frog. Peerless Warden spells. Gluttonous Growth. Plants in the area grow rapidly, taking on carnivorous characteristics as they seek to consume prey. So 120 feet, 20-foot burst. All the plants grow super big and try to eat everyone. They have to make a reflex save, or they're grabbed until the beginning of their next turn, or they escape. On a failure, they're grabbed until the spell ends, or they escape. Critical failure, they are restrained until the spell ends, or they escaped. On successive rounds, if you're sustaining, everyone that's grabbed takes damage. So that's a pretty good area of control and some AoE damage output. Packbreaker. I really love this one. You deceive a creature by changing their perception of their allies' behavior. Each affected creature suspects their allies have changed allegiance. So if you can get this to land on like the big bad guy, they no longer get any flanks from their friends. On failure to their will saves, they're also confused. They might start hitting their allies. That one is, I like the strategic aspects of that very much. Pulverizing Wake. Let's see here. Imitating raptorial creatures, you attack with such speed it drives a sonic shockwave. Make a melee strike. Creature in your reach, if you hit, deal an additional 3d8 sonic damage. I mean, an attack and some extra damage, not great. However, second paragraph, regardless of the result of your strike, so even if you miss, the creature becomes the point of origin for a 15-foot cone aimed directly away from you. All creatures in that cone take 68 damage. So that is pretty neat, but you're going to have to be very well lined up with where your allies are when you drop that. Next up, Witches of the Wild. We get 2 new patrons. I love the Witch patron system and what they changed with it. I think there is a lot of room for some homebrew world building on what other patrons might be out there offering power to your PCs. So if you get someone who just doesn't quite find the right patron, don't be afraid to create something that makes sense for your world and go out there and get it. I don't think the patron mechanic itself is super complex. I think pretty much anyone could drop in and come up with some good patrons and some reasonable opening cantrips. So give it a shot at your table. Let me know your favorite homebrew patrons. I'd love to hear about them. But these 2 new ones are the Devourer of Decay. So this patron appeared at the end or near end of a life, flickering in feverish visions and glistening mysteriously in the eyes of waiting scavengers. Although horrifying to many, decay creates the resources needed for new life. This fate awaits you, and possibly even your patron, whether they are a towering arboreal, a subterranean fungus creature, or one of the psychopomps that shepherds the entire process along. So this is going to be a primal spell list. Patron skill is nature. You're going to get the Scrounger's Glee Hex, and your familiar is going to be this sickly, gaunt creature that always looks like it's on the verge of death. When you cast or sustain a hex, your familiar can draw on the waning strength of another to sustain itself. One creature within 15 feet of your familiar with less than half of its maximum hit points becomes sickened 1 unless it succeeds a fortitude save. So that's cool. When you're sustaining your hex, your familiar's dishing out some debuffs on the bad guys that really probably don't want to be debuffed because they're almost at the end. The cantrip you get access to is Scrounger's Glee. One creature 30 feet will sustain for up to 1 minute. With a cruel laugh and a flash of your canines, you make the target understand that death is coming to claim it, and that its demise will serve to strengthen another. The target becomes frightened 1 if it fails a will save, frightened 2 on a critical failure. The condition can't be reduced below 1 while the spell is active, so you're permanently at least frightening 1 something, so that's good. You can dismiss the spell as a reaction when an ally critically succeeds a strike against the target, restoring 1d4 hit points to that ally. So while you're fearing them, someone gets a crit, you can give your ally a little bit of a boost, and that does heighten. Next, we have Ripple in the Deep. Your patron appeared. It was an unfathomably large shadow beneath the waves, possibly an ancient denizen of the vast waters like a kraken. Whether channeling the lethal terror of an oceanic predator or singing the ancestral wisdom of gentle giants, your Leviathan patron brings you lessons from the unplumbed depths of the world. So big water patron. You are going to get the Sea Hex cantrip, and your familiar will learn Dizzying Colors or Grease. Familiar of Overwhelming Tide, so your familiar constantly drips with ocean water, so even if they're not a water creature, they're always wet. That could be kind of funny. When you cast or sustain a hex, you can cause a small wave to surge from your familiar. One creature within 10 feet of the familiar is pushed 5 feet away from them. So good little AoE control there. Sting of the Sea. So long tentacles that likely belong to an octopus, anemone, or a manivore dripping with briny water appear from the glowing blue portal to wrap around your target's face. So again, you're just opening portals to let tentacle monsters out. They must make a fortitude save. And let's see, if they succeed, they're taking a -2 penalty to perception checks. If they fail, they're dazzled. If they crit fail, they are blinded. And we got Whispering Wings. So we got an air-themed one now. Wings and swirling winds announce the approach of your patron. The wings might have been radiantly feathered, jeweled like a dragonfly's, or strangely mechanical or leathery. Again, these were all primal. Makes sense given the book. You are going to learn the Murmuration Hex, and your familiar learns Gentle Landing. Your familiar gets nimble flight, so even if your familiar doesn't have wings, it sometimes moves as if carried by wind. When you cast or sustain a hex, your familiar can fly up to 15 feet, so free movement, flying, even if your familiar can't fly. The hex, the target feels the brush of feathers against its skin and hears screeches in its ears, warning it to keep away from creatures you designate. That's within 30 feet of you when you cast this spell. Once per round, if the target moves closer to the designated creature, it must attempt a will save or take 1d4 piercing or sonic damage. So this could be really good. You're playing this defensive role, keeping bad guys away from maybe the injured person, the squishy person, someone that's under attack that normally shouldn't be. Let's see. Critical success unaffected, success half damage, failure full. Crit failure, they're taking 1d4 sonic and piercing. And if they attempt an attack roll or hostile skill check this round, it takes a -2 penalty on that roll. And this does scale up with being heightened. All right, so some greater lessons. Blood in the Water. This is for the most recent one we did. So it has to be someone who is taking persistent bleed damage. And you cast this hex, predators are drawn to the scent of blood. And basically you're just going to create a Sharknado of spiritual sharks. They take 2d6 spirit damage, basic reflex save to save. If the target takes any damage from this spell, it treats all water as difficult terrain for 1 round, as these spiritual predators are swirling around them and attempting to drag them down. I'm sorry, spectral, not spiritual. If you deal slashing damage to the target while this spell is active, you automatically sustain the spell. So if you are a little bit more of a melee witch and you have some slashing damage, you can get a free sustain by dealing damage to them and keep this rolling. Mycological malady, so this is decay. It is touch, so you have to touch your target, and you infect them with fungal spores to hasten the cycle of decay. Target has to take fortitude save. The undead that aren't incorporeal, such as skeletons and zombies, who are normally immune to disease, are not immune to the disease caused by these spores. So, let's see here. They have to roll a fortitude save. Critical success unaffected. Success, the target begins to sprout mushrooms and is enfeebled 2 for 1 round. If they fail, they are afflicted with the void cap spores at stage 1, which oddly enough is still enfeebled 2. And then critical failure, they're at stage 2, which is enfeebled 2 and slowed 1. And if they fail again, they go to stage 3, which is enfeebled 2, slowed 1, and stupefied 2. So these spores could get pretty devastating on the debuff range as this happens. Sheltering Wings, so this is for the Flock Patron. An ally moves through a square within 15 feet of you or uses an action that has the move trait. So someone has to be moving around, and then you could use this reaction to place a hex on them. Like migratory birds, you know everyone flies farther together. You cause immense wings to sprout from your familiar, and your familiar flies up to 30 feet, though it must move toward the triggering ally. If your familiar ends this movement adjacent to the triggering ally, it lands on their back, and until the beginning of your next turn, the familiar automatically is carried by the ally, and its wings provide them cover. When the spell ends, the familiar hops off and your ally into an adjacent square. So you give them cover. Maybe if it was greater cover, I don't see that being super valuable. I felt the other two were a little more impressive than that. Witch Feats, you can scatter swarm. Sadly, only once per round, but you reach through your familiar to magically disperse a group of smaller threats. A swarm that shares a space with your familiar takes damage equal to the weakness to area damage. So you just got to auto damage them for their weakness, which I think is usually 10, maybe 15. Could be a decent little punch, especially if you've already done something else. Maybe you can't reach the swarm. I could see that one being useful. Importance of the Haruspecs. Yeah, I think that's right. A creature within 30 feet of you is reduced to 0 hit points. Also, I don't think I mentioned this. These are new feats available to all witches. Let's see. Although the divinations of Aharuspex traditionally require organs and lengthy interpretations, you've learned how to glimpse the future in a more simple fashion by reading creatures' wounds. The glimpse of the future gives guidance on what tools are best to use next. Roll a d12 to determine the damage type favored by your prediction. The next time before the end of your next turn that you or your allies deal that damage type to an enemy, that enemy has a weakness to your level against that damage. So, okay. You do a reaction because someone has been reduced to 0 hit points. You roll a d12, you look at those wounds from that downed creature, and you get a 6, and so you determine that the next thing that gets struck is going to be weak to fire damage, and you're level 10, so everyone dealing fire damage deals an extra 10 damage. That can be pretty robust. Wild Witch Armament, so this is going to boost up some more options for your Eldritch Nails, Iron Teeth, Living Hair if you've gone that route with your Witch Armaments. Now we're on to the Bard. We got the Zoophonia Muse. So this is a new Muse, so a subclass for your Bard, where you are basically making bird calls and other animal noises. If you were maybe growing up in Wyoming with my dad, he would love to make elk calls at parties. It was his thing. So perhaps he had some Zoophonia Muse going with that. But this could be a very interesting way to approach your Bard. You get Summon Animal as your Muse spell, which will be very important for some of these feats going on through here. So Zoophonic Communication. You can request from animals using performance instead of diplomacy. So you sing your bird songs, and you get to see if animals will work for you. You can become a Disney princess. Bestial Snarling. You can convey a subtle menace with a low growl. Make a performance check against a will DC to basically intimidate targets and give them the frightened condition, anyone around you, as well as anyone around your summoned animal or animal companion. Zoophonic Compositions. So once per day, if you're doing a composition spell, you get a free action. You can sustain your summon animal, spell, or command animal while you are doing your composition, but it's only once per day. So that's kind of weak. It's only one round that you get to sustain that for. Yeah, don't know how I feel about that. Ears of the Forest. Keep an ear open for nearby creatures and exploring your surroundings. When you seek, if there are any willing animals in the selected area, you can borrow their senses. So you get tremor sense or scent or whatever animals in the area might be. Songbird's Call. You can call the wilds with the voice of a songbird. Summoning a cloud of its kin. You learn Songbird's Call composition spell. We'll get to that down below. Chorus Companion. So you have to have a mature animal companion for this one. Animal can be your musical partner. Your animal companion becomes trained in Perform. And when you cast a composition spell, you can have it originate from your animal companion instead of you, as long as they're within 30 feet. Musical Studies. You can call them to your side as you cast your spells. So you can cast Summon Animal and do a one-action composition spell and do it all together. Pack Performance. So this is an interesting one. So if someone counteracts a spell that you're casting, you have an animal minion within 30 feet of you, you use this reaction, and you and your animal sing together. And cutting through any of these disruptions, the animal assisting you can stride and strike the triggering creature, and if the attack succeeds, your action isn't counteracted or disrupted. So basically, you're doing a bard spell, someone counteracts you, use this reaction, your pet dog goes over, bites them, succeeds, they waste their counteract, you got a free damage, and your spell still goes off. I really think that one's pretty solid. 18 though, I'd have to compare it to other bard stuff off the cuff. I don't know how that stacks up to the older bard level 18 abilities. But still a lot of actions for a reaction, so I generally like anything that lets you do more things. Songbird's Call. All creatures within the area of whirling bird. So it summons in a whole bunch of birds. Everyone in the birds becomes concealed, and all the creatures outside of the area become concealed to the creatures inside the swarm of birds. And everyone in there except you is taking 1d6 piercing damage as the birds peck at them, and this does scale up. I think as a party, I'd rather still have everyone with Inspire Courage. I don't see this one being a super favorite, but I might be wrong. Maybe that damage just expands as your bard's moving around the field, but I find that one pretty lackluster. All right. I'm going to save archetypes for another video. So this is the changes to the existing classes in Pathfinder. Let me know in the comments what you think of some of these and if you're excited to play any of them. And I'll wish you guys fantastic adventures on your 20-sided adventures.